This work is about the formalization of quantifiers, in particular for proof assistance. More precisely, what we want to do is to formalize results about proof theory, in particular syntactic results like cut elimination, normalization, and other proof transformation, for logical systems which deal with quantifiers. The goal is not just to formalize one particular result, but to develop libraries that could be reused in such a way that we can get a corpus of results about proof theory with the general goal of encouraging people who usually work on paper to formalize that result on machine. And this particular goal has important impacts on the choice of the formalization. So a first remark is that if the question of formalizing general binders is known to be a complex problem, here we just focus on quantifiers, so there is hope for something simpler. And because we want as many users as possible, we want the interface of the formalization to be as natural as possible for human. And for this reason, we want to focus on names rather than using indices. But we need to avoid as far as possible the use of renamings because it makes using a formalization really boring. Finally, because we want the largest possible audience, we don't want to depend on some specific methodological constructions. Maybe for a given proof assistance, it's not the best approach, but it gives you something which you could move from one proof assistant to another more easily. And moreover, it ensures that a given user will not go away just because you rely on meta construction he doesn't know. Let me say a few words about the question of formalizing general binders with an example in the lambda calculus. So if you consider this lambda term, which is a closed lambda term where all variables are named differently, then along reduction, it will happen that this y is going to be substituted for this x, and as a consequence, it will be captured by this lambda y. And as a result, if we do not make a difference between red y and blue y, here we have a capture. So to avoid it, we have no choice but introducing some renamings of variables or doing some alpha conversion and so on. Unfortunately, formalizing this and trying to solve the capture problem is a difficult question, and there is currently no consensus on the solution to use. Here is the list of some of the proposed approaches with names, indices, higher order abstract syntax, the Nabla quantifier, nominal approaches. And you could also find some proposals which mix some of the approaches above. And that's, for example, what happened with the locally nameless approach, which uses names for the free variables and indices for bound variables. So remember that because we will come back to this later in the talk. Fortunately, what we have seen so far is somehow a worst case situation for name capture. And we could consider restriction where things are easier to deal with. And this is the case of weak reduction in the lambda calculus, meaning that you don't reduce under binders, and using the Baron-Dweck convention, which ensures that the names used for free variables are different from the one used for bound variables. And if you consider this situation where you have a weak reduction, thanks to Baron-Dweck convention, the free variables of U cannot be bound in T. And then the reduction here leads to a substitution where no capture can occur. And thus, there is no need for renaming in this very particular situation. So let's come back to our question, which is about quantification. In first order logic, there are two specificities. So the first one is what we've already seen. substitution can be dealt with like in the weak normalization for the lambda calculus, because in, for example, the Hilbert system, almost the only place where substitution occurs is in this formula. For xa implies A substituted with T. And if you write this formula this way, you can perfectly see that the substitution comes from the outside. And this is very similar to weak reduction. So we are in the good case for substitution. The second point is about equality of objects. In the lambda calculus, you really want equality to be terms up to alpha equivalence. And this needs to define an alpha equivalence or to define a quotient or to make a term equal enough. But in the logical context, like first order logic, you could perfectly have two representations which are different here for all x, p of x, and for all y, p of y. Since you're dealing anyway with the attainment relation, this formula entails this one and conversely, but there is no need for them to be really equal. And so no quotient up to alpha equivalence is really needed. So with this particular properties, let's try to move on and see how to formalize formulas. The standard approach is the named one, where you choose a set V of variables and you build terms from variables and by applying function symbols to terms. Formulas are obtained by applying relation symbols to terms and by using some propositional connectives and quantifiers. Here, in all the definitions in the talk, I will focus on the for all quantifier. Everything works for there exist. Sometime in the example, I will use some instances of exist to have a meaningful example, but there is no specificity here for there exist, so I focus on for. So that's the name approach, and unfortunately, it is subject to capture troubles when dealing with substitution. A solution has been proposed to that, which is called the locally named representation. And the key idea, which is already present in Genzen, by the way, is to introduce an additional set E of parameters, which come here in the terms. So now we have two objects, the variables and the parameters. And the idea of parameters here is really to have some set of constant symbols you could use. In particular, a closed term is just a term with no variable. You can do whatever you want with parameters. So concretely, closed terms here are those generated by this part of the grammar. Concerning formulas, nothing changes, but there is an important effect, which is since the only binder in formulas here is for all x, which acts on a variable, there is no way to bind a parameter. And in particular, this will help for substitution. So the notion of closed formula we consider is a formula with no free variable, but it can perfectly contain parameters. And this allows us to define a simple notion of substitution as soon as we assume the substituted term to be closed. That is, with parameters, but no variable. Indeed, if we want to substitute in x in for all xa, we do nothing, because x is bound in A. And if you want to substitute in for all y for a different y, then we simply commute the substitution because there is no possibility for capture here since t is closed and binder is on a variable. This is perfectly good for formulas. So this locally named representation works very well. And now we have to move to proofs, which is the real interesting part. Let's start with Genzen's rule. So we have already seen the way Genzen defines terms and formula. It's a locally named approach. For rules which require substitution, the Genzen proposal is the natural one, but requiring this closeness constraint for the substitution to be meaningful. Let's now look at the for all introduction rule. When you open up a for all x quantifier here, you create a free x and you immediately correct it by substituting a parameter e called the eigenvariable instead of x. And you ask this eigenvariable to be fresh. Let's have a look at proof transformation. Here is an example where we do a for all introduction rule followed by a for all elimination rule. So it's a typical pattern you want to transform in the normalization of proofs in natural deduction. And you want to start from this proof and do a substitution to get this conclusion. So you start from pi, and you want to substitute t for e to get the original conclusion. And here you see something very important happening. So far, parameters were just like constant symbols. But now they are much more like variables again, because they are subject to substitution, and that's typical of a variable. So what happened is that variables like x are variables for formula and bound in formulas, while eigenvariables or parameter are now variables for proof and bound in proofs. And this comes with some troubles. Consider this example. We have a proof from PE, PE, QE prime. You do a left for all x where x is instantiated by the closed term e. And here a right introduction of for all where e prime is chosen as an eigenvariable for y. And now in this proof, we want to substitute fe prime for e. We start from the bottom, e becomes fe prime. And now we want to go up. E becomes fe prime, and the rest is not modified because there is no e inside. But there is a big problem here. Remember that when you do a for all introduction, the eigenvariable must be fresh, while now it appears in the context. It's okay here, but yes, this is not a valid application of the rule. And here we have no choice but renaming the eigenvariable. So now not only we are going to propagate the substitution, but also we should do some on-the-fly renaming for eigenvariable. So we go up with the substitution, applied here, for example, and also renaming the eigenvariable e prime into e second. We go up, and here we face a slightly different problem, which is to know whether or not this green here should be substituted by this substitution. In fact, it's not completely clear. I don't want to enter the details, but because this he has been introduced inside the proof, it could be, in some cases, more natural not to do the substitution. So both work, doing the substitution or not, but there is a choice here which is not canonical, and it's, again, symptomatic of the problems we have when substituting eigenvariables. So this tells us a bit about the role of these eigenvariables. In fact, what happens in this introduction rule is that the binding aspect of this for all connective is moved to a binding property of the rule itself. The connective binds the variable, the rule binds the parameter, the eigenvariable e. So eigenvariables, considering them from the proof point of view, are really variables. So we have some problem about substitution in proofs because of names and of eigenvariables being bound. So let's try to see what happens with a completely different approach where you use indices instead of name, and that's the De Bruijn approach. So here you have only one kind of variables, natural numbers, and formulas are built as before, except that the for all quantifier is always binding the variable 0. So there is no need to say it. Concerning substitution in terms and proofs, a common natural approach in De Bruijn setting is to consider a parallel substitution. So if you have a function, a substitution function from all natural numbers to terms, you can do a parallel substitution in a term or in a formula. The key cases are the following. If you want to substitute a natural number, you simply compute the image with respect to the substitution function R. And now if you want to substitute on a for all formula, you commute with the for all, but because you go below a binder, you need to lift the substitution because 0 here is bound, so R is not allowed anymore to act on 0, for example. And this is how it is defined. As a particular substitution function, you can consider the lifting function, which is just increasing all natural numbers. And now if you want to lift a substitution function, for n equals 0, you get 0. But for bigger numbers, you compute R of n minus 1. And because it is now below a binder, you need to lift the result. Another substitution function that is useful is the t tilde function. If t is a closed term, you define t tilde of n by t tilde of 0 is t. And for bigger numbers, you just decrease them. With this material, we can now look at the rules in De Bruijn style. The rules that do instantiation with a term are just using this substitution with the substitution function t tilde. It's more interesting here for the for all introduction. So on the right-hand side, you simply open the binding, and somehow the binding power of this for all is moved to the rule. But on the context, you have to lift all formulas up, because maybe there is a 0 here, and the 0 is free in gamma. But now the 0 in A corresponds to the quantifier here or there. And so we need to lift up the 0e into a 1 so that there is no clash between 0 in A. Otherwise stated, it means that we lift the context as a way to ensure that there is no name clash. That is the way the side condition of freshness of names is implemented in this De Bruijn approach. Here is an example. So this is a formula written in De Bruijn style. We do a for all introduction, so we simply remove the for all. We lift the left-hand side, but since it's closed, there is no impact. Now we do the exist left, which is similar to the for all right. We simply remove it on the left. And here we have to lift the formula. So this free 1 is lifted to 2. Now we do instantiation. We instantiate yellow, orange 0 by red 1. And this makes the other parameter decrease because we have removed a quantifier. And similarly here, blue 0 is instantiated by green 0, and 2 becomes 1. So here I've put color to help you follow the name of variables, but one defect of the Bruijn approach is that the name of a variable could change along a proof. Here, 1, 2, 1, all these red occurrences correspond to the same variable. And this is something which is very good for machine, but sometimes tricky to handle for human, and in particular could be subject to mistakes when building proofs. Let us focus now on proof transformation. So if I have again this pattern for all intro followed by for all elim, I want to reduce this. And for that, I take the proof pi here. And by doing the t tilde substitution, I get a proof of the original conclusion. So what remains to do is to define this substitution operation on proofs. And it's general operation. You take a substitution function, and if you want to substitute in a proof, the key case is for the for all introduction rule, where you move the substitution up, but since you cross the for all introduction, you need to lift the substitution here, as we've done for crossing a for all in a formula. So this works well, but with this defect of many indices manipulation and providing something which is not so easy to read for a human user. So what we want to do now is to take the best of the locally named approach for formulas and the De Bruijn approach for proofs. And this is what we called the anti-locally nameless approach. Why this name? Well, the formulas we are going to use are the locally named formulas, so everything we have already seen. But so far, the set of parameters was arbitrary. And here we do a specific choice of using natural numbers as parameters. So it's just an instance of the locally named setting. But what happens now is that free names are natural numbers and bound variables are named. And this is exactly the converse of the locally nameless approach. So that's why we call it the anti-locally nameless formalization. Because we have two kinds of objects, parameters and variables, we need two kinds of substitution. The standard substitution of variables by term. It comes from the locally named approach subject to the hypothesis that the substituting term is closed. And a parallel substitution for indices, which is similar to the Bruin, but not exactly the same thing. For natural numbers, it's just applying the function. But now when you go across a for all quantifier, you don't need to change the substitution. It's simple commutation. Remember that in the De Bruyn approach, you need to lift R here. And this is because you are crossing a for all. But now, for all acts on a variable here, while the domain of R is natural number. So there is no conflict between this binder and this substitution. So it gives you simple commutation. And now we can define the rules. So for instantiation, the rules are exactly the same as Genzen's one. We have the closedness assumption and we do substitution. And what is really new is the introduction rule for all. It's a mix of Genzen and De Bruyn rules. So on the left here, you find exactly the De Bruyn approach with the lifting. On the right-hand side, you have here the Genzen part where X is replaced by an eigenvariable. And here, the choice will always be 0 as an eigenvariable. But because we are introducing this 0, we need to lift indices in A to avoid conflict. So if we look at globally, what we do is we lift everybody and transform X into 0 on the right-hand side. So the binding power of the for all here acting on X is moved to the binding for all of this rule now acting to 0. And that's the move from variable to eigenvariable. Let us look at some example and compare it with De Bruyn. So that's the proof we've seen before, and that's the same proof with the anti-locally nameless presentation. So here we get the formula, which at least I find myself more readable. There exists x for all y, p of xy implies for all y there exists x, p of xy. And now we start proving it. We have a for all introduction rule, so we instantiate y as a particular eigenvariable 0. We leave the context, but there is no index, so nothing to do. Here we do the left exists rule, so we need to turn x into the eigenvariable 0 and lift the context. This is the reason why this 0 in the context becomes a 1 now. Then we instantiate the orange y by red 1, and then the blue x by green 0. And we're done. So it's important to remark that both in De Bruyn and anti-locally nameless, the representation of a variable changes along the proof. So we have already seen in De Bruyn that all these red objects correspond to the same variable, but the name may vary. And it's the same here. We can have y, 0, or 1. But an important difference is that in this presentation, the name is always the same inside a sequence. Here, it's twice 1. While in the De Bruyn approach, the name can change inside a sequence. This is because we have this exist quantifier here. And this may seem to be a small difference, but it's very important in practice, because when you are doing your formalization on a proof assistant, very often you focalize on a current state of the proof. So you're really focusing on one given sequence. And if you focus on one sequence, it helps a lot for readability that in this sequence, occurrences of a given variable are all named the same way. So if the brain is good for machine, this new approach is much better for human, in particular because of the stability of names inside sequences. So names are not stable inside proof, but they are at least stable inside a sequence. The second point is that since we use name, we can rely on what the human want to say with these names. So for example, here, it's very important when you write the formula that you keep exist x with the same name on both sides and for all y as well, because what is said here is that a uniform quantification there exists x for all y implies a non-uniform one for all y there exists x. And the name, the choice of the name is very important to help readability. And that's something you can do with a named approach. Let's move now to the notion of substitution and proof transformation with this anti-locally nameless approach. So we focus again on the pattern for all introduction, for all elimination, which requires to do some substitution in pi to get the conclusion here. So what we have to do again is to define pi with the substitution t tilde, and it's the same as for the brain. So we define substitution with a general substitution R, and when you go across for all introduction, we need to lift up the substitution. And it works perfectly well because we have this kind of properties about lifting and substitution that ensures you that when you do the substitution t tilde in pi, this acts on this sequence and provides you exactly the conclusion you want. Here is a concrete example of substitution. We have here the proof we have been seeing before, and I add a for all elimination rule. So I'm missing sequence calculus and natural deduction here to make things easy to manipulate. So this for all elimination is instantiating y by t. So I have a for all introduction, for all elimination pattern. So what I do is I keep the upper part of the proof and I do the substitution. And what I want to get is a proof with the same conclusion, which is exactly what I will have here. I substitute 0 by t, and I get t. And now I move across a left exist rule, which is a rule with an eigenvariable. So the context has to be lifted. And this is why now we have t up, t up, t up everywhere. And this exactly corresponds to the fact that here we had 0 and 1, 1, 1, 1. So 0 maps to t, and 1 maps to t up. As a concrete application, I've been formalizing in Coq the first order natural deduction for intuitionistic logic. So we have seen almost everything already because terms are the one from this locally named approach with natural numbers, so the anti-locally nameless presentation. Formulas the same, and for rules, we have axiom, introduction elimination for the arrow, and the two rules we have already seen for the quantifier, for all elimination in Genzen style, and for all introduction in the new mixed Genzen de Prince style. Normalization has been formalized. There is no particular problem. And equivalence with Hilbert system has been formalized as well. It's a bit more tedious, and it's normal because this presentation is much easier to manipulate than Hilbert system, and the price to pay is that they are not so close one to each other, so proving the equivalence requires some manipulations. Let me give you some comments about possible variations. So I've been focusing so far on first order quantifiers. It's also possible to address second order quantification as soon as you focus on propositional second order. So no interaction with first order. Here it's an example. So it's a system F style of second order quantification where there is no first order quantifiers. So the approach consists in putting natural numbers at the formula level now. However, when you mix first and second order quantifiers, you get some binding troubles in substitution. And here somehow substitution acts as a true binder. And it's not possible anymore to use the anti-local nameless approach. This has been tested with various logical systems, sequence calculus, natural deduction, for intuitionistic, classical, or linear logic, and it works perfectly well. There is no major difference from one logic to another. So to conclude, let me sum up a few advantages and defects of this new anti-locally nameless approach. So formulas and all objects are given as first-order objects. There is no need for specific metalogical constructs. So it makes it usable in a priori any proof assistant. And moreover, it does not require particular knowledge from the users. There is almost no use of renaming. And the representation of formulas is a variable, is stable inside sequence and formulas, not in proofs, unfortunately, as I mentioned here, but it's a good point that inside a sequence, occurrences of a given variable have the same representation. It works for first-order logic, propositional second-order logic, but unfortunately, it doesn't work with mixing both as in full second-order quantification. And if at the very beginning we would have been happy to use only names, because of the binding structure of the for all rules in proofs, we still have some indices manipulation to deal with. Thank you very much.